Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Felicia Perez, and I am the author of my book. It's called My Unheard Voice by Felicia Perez. It's about my 7 years of childhood sexual abuse. Today I'm going to be talking about chapter 2 of my book. Yesterday I talked about chapter 1, which was about my 10th birthday party, and today I'm going to talk about chapter 2. So this is kind of a different chapter. This one is talking about more about, my family background and, how I ended up getting molested in the first place. But this is kind of, going back in time, back into, my childhood and, my background. So my mom and dad were high school sweethearts. They fell in love in high school. They got married. They had my older sister. Then they had my brother, and then, I was born. So I was born in 1978. Their marriage had issues, but I don't really know much about that because I was just a baby. I was 2 when they split up. Then they got back together, and then I was 4 or 5 when, they actually got the divorce. So after the divorce, my mom was struggling. She was having a hard time because she was made to leave the house instead of the other way around. It was my dad's house and my grandparents lived next door. So he pretty much kicked her out and she had to leave without her kids. So that was, of course, traumatizing for her. It was heartbreaking for her, and she didn't know how to handle it. She was depressed. So she ended up marrying a man that she, just met. She got married, and he ended up being my stepfather, and he is the one who abused me. Okay, so let me go back in time a little bit. So I would visit my mom, during the summers and during weekends and holidays. The rest of the time I was living with my father full time. My father had custody of us 3 kids. Because he had the stable home and he had the stable job. So he fought for custody and he won. So my mom had visitation rights, and I would visit her during, the summers and weekends. They moved, her and my stepdad had moved to the Houston area around this time. So I would go and visit them pretty often. Like during the weekends and stuff, I would go visit them. During holidays, I was over there. So, it was a new man in my life. I didn't know him, but, he was kind to me. He was gentle. He liked to cuddle. He liked, to carry me. By this time, I was 5. He liked carrying me. He liked to lay on the couch with me and watch TV. He gave me the attention that I didn't really have. My father wasn't really, he wasn't really, an emotional person. My dad was kind of quiet. He worked a lot, and then, after work, he would go to the ranch and go feed the cattle. So he wasn't really emotional. I rarely got a hug from him. When I was older, yes, I did get several hugs from him when I was older, but my younger years, I don't really remember all that much. I know he did his best, and he was a great man. I will never talk bad about my father. He was a great father. He was a great man. And I know he loved me with all of his heart. During the times when I would go visit my mother, sometimes I would go alone, and sometimes my brother and sister would join me. It all kind of depended. It depended on, what was going on and whatnot. So when I would stay, in my full-time house with my dad, my grandmother she was a diabetic, and she had lost her vision, at a pretty young age. She was in her 50s, and my grandfather would take care of her. But when it was the weekends or, after school, it was my job to take care of her. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I became a nurse. It was very important to me, to take care of people, and it still is. I take care of the elderly right now. I do home health, and, I go to patients' house and care for the elderly and, for younger patients, after surgeries and whatnot. So after school, it was my job to go home and take care of my grandmother so I can give my grandfather a little break. He would go to the Dairy Queen, drink coffee with his friends, go play cards, just have a little free time for himself. And I would stay with my grandmother. I loved her dearly. Of course I did. I think that there were signs about the abuse that she could have seen early on. And of course, I'll go deeper into that in the further chapters once I get to that section. But yeah, there were signs that she could have seen, and she didn't. Or if she did, she ignored it. I'm not really sure. I know she had a lot of hate for my mom and a lot of anger, towards my mom. Of course, she blamed my mom for their divorce. She blamed my mom, for everything. She would call my mom names. She would always trash talk her. Even though I was little, I grew up hearing stories about my mom and hearing my mom being trash talked pretty much on a daily basis. My grandmother just had a lot of hate and anger for her, which, I didn't really understand. I was little, so I didn't really understand, but, it still happened anyway. So as I grew older, I started spending more and more time with my mom because I was so attached to her, that it was hard. I cried a lot, when I was little. I was always crying for my mom because I was only 5 and, my mom was gone. And, it was hard. It was hard for me. I needed my mom. I loved my mother so deeply, and I needed, her hugs. I needed, her soft hands. I needed my mom. And my father just made it very clear that she wasn't coming back home. And I had to, stop crying, or he would make me cry. That's kind of what he would say. But he never actually spanked me or anything like that. There was just words. So, I always cried for my mom, and I wished she was there. I always wanted to be with her. I always wanted her to be there when I wasn't with her. And I couldn't really just pick up the phone and call her because I was a child. I didn't even know how to use a phone. And, it was kind of hard for me because my older brother and sister, they lived with my mom, because they were older than I was. They spent several years with my mom, and, they have happy memories, about like Christmases and getting new bikes and, Thanksgiving. And they have great memories that I don't have. I don't have any of those memories. My memories were completely opposite. I don't remember ever having a Christmas tree in my dad's home when I, was growing up. We never had a Christmas tree. My grandparents lived right next door. We never had a Christmas tree. For Christmas, my father would give us, he would give me cash, that I would save to go and spend whenever I would visit my mom. He really didn't, take us out. He didn't, get us any, lavish gifts or anything like that. Of course, we were a poor family. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house. We ate most meals next door at my grandparents'. Some days my father would, barbecue for all of us, and we would, eat together at my grandparents' house. It was just different because when I was with my mom, we would go shopping. We would, do fun things. She would take us, skating. We would always go to a skating rink, there in Galveston, and, I loved to skate. And we would go and have fun skating. My stepdad was great to me. He loved spending time with me. He loved, hugging me, and, he loved being touchy, which in the beginning it was, was fine. That's normal. But then, of course, it got worse. But in the beginning, everything was good. And I was happy. I was happy to visit my mom, and I was happy to be with her. And when I came back home, I cried because I missed her so very much. And there was nothing I could do about it. I was just a child. I was only 5. There was nothing I could do. I had no control over anything. And I wish that my dad was still here with us so I could ask him, a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions that I have that I will probably never get answers to because he passed away about 20 years ago. So I'll probably never have the answers to the questions I have. So, it's been hard. Of course, it's been tough. My mom has always been there for me. She loves me with all of her heart. I am her best friend. And, we've always had a very close relationship, and I was very attached to her as a child. So any minute that I got to spend with her, I cherished it. I loved it. I would sit by her. I would stand by her. I was always by her side. And she was my mom. I loved her dearly. So when my stepdad started with the abuse, his first threat was that he wouldn't allow me to see my mom anymore. He would tell my mom that I was a bad kid, and, he said that he would stop me from seeing her, which I believed. I believed he would, or I believed, he would tell my dad something, and, my dad would, not let me go anymore. And I didn't get to see her that often, so I wanted every minute I could get with her. So once he started making the threats, that I wouldn't be able to see her, that was a lot. It was a lot, because I couldn't bear not seeing her. So I did what he told me to do, and, I did, whatever. I let him do whatever he wanted to do to me. But at the time, I didn't know it was wrong. I was a child. I was 5. I didn't know any better. Looking back, I wish I had known better, but I simply didn't. And so that went on for years. So my father did pass away about 20 years ago, and that's what kind of caused my breakdown in my mid-20s. So, of course, I'll talk about that in a further chapter as well. For this video, I really just wanted to talk about my background and, my family background and, my childhood. So when I get into the further chapters, it'll all kind of make more sense. We lived in a small town in Texas where it's, majority of the citizens are Hispanic. So everybody here, speak English and Spanish, and we're all, it's a small town. Everybody kind of knows everybody. Everybody knows my grandparents. Everybody knew my mom. Everybody knew my dad. So, everybody knew everybody. So when I get into further chapters, I think a lot of this will kind of make more sense. I just wanted to get chapter 2 done. Of course, if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me, leave a comment on this video, or you can join my Facebook group. It is called The Unheard Voices. Of course, you can send me a private message if you want to. I'm here to help anybody who needs help, because I'm strongly fighting against childhood sexual abuse. I think awareness needs to be made, and I hate to say it, but the people who really need to be the ones talking are the victims, because we know what's happened. We know what's going on. We know what happened. We know what continues to happen in our minds. And, counselors really don't get it, because they aren't actually in that position. Yes, they help. Of course, they help their patients, they help their clients, but they weren't actually in the position. So it's kind of harder. The DA, doesn't really know shit about anything. So I think doctors, don't know much about anything either. I think the people who need to speak up are the victims. And that's what I'm trying my best to do. I'm looking for more supporters for my page, more supporters to join me, join my fight, talk about your story, share your story with others. If change is going to happen, we have to make it change. It's not just going to happen on its own. So I'm asking for a group of group of people to join behind me and, join my army, because we have to make ourselves heard. If not, we're just going to continue to be ignored and nothing is going to happen. If you need anything, I'm always here. Thank you.